From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Around 1,000 people have been detained in France as Yellow Vest protests and clashes continue this Saturday. Riot police fired tear gas and rubber bullets against protesters in Paris, while demonstrators set barricades on fire and hurled rocks in the worst scene of rioting in the French capital in decades. More demonstrations are also taking place across the country against the tax policies of President Emmanuel Macron. The opposition is urging the government to take action.
That's why the tax had nothing ecological but its name. Actually, only 19% of its product was earmarked to ecological transition programs. I think it is not good what it did, to bribe the ecological speech to attribute it to something that had nothing to do with it.
Over 100 people have been injured on Saturday protests. Riot forces are using water cannon, tear gas, and batons to confront the 8,000 people demonstrating in Paris alone.
When I see there are some people that eat, no, it's not right. I'm emotional today. To be honest with you, if not, I wouldn't have been in the streets. I'm upset. There are people who don't earn enough to make a living, who earn €1,000 a month. There's a lot of poverty. I don't know. In that moron, it's horrible.
The whole of France is here. I identify myself with the Yellow Vests. The Yellow Vests are here in support of an idea. The whole nation is one. The whole of France is here. There is no difference between us. They are imposing taxes, taxes, taxes. And I can't be like that anymore.
And the Yellow Vest protests have also turned violent in the city of Mozote. At least 11 people have been arrested after clashes broke out between protesters and police in the southern city. That happened after a day of peaceful demonstrations. Our correspondent in Paris, Sergio Rodrigo, tells us more.
French citizens are back to the streets to say no to the neoliberal policies promoted by Emmanuel Macron's government. Here at the Champs-Élysées in Paris, since very early in the morning, more than 8,000 police officers deployed in Paris and over 89,000 in the whole country have tried to prevent demonstrators to get to the Arc of Triumph. The protests have left hundreds of wounded due to the shooting of tear gas and rubber bullets by the police. Additionally, according to the prefecture of Paris, there have been hundreds of people detained over the last hours. Since very early in the morning, protesters have demonstrated in different places in the capital of France. Something that has been virtually impossible because the police officers have been dispersing groups of protesters in each location. The Yellow Vests want President Macron to resign, as well as a rollback of neoliberal policies. The Yellow Vests insist that life has become harder in France, working conditions are harder, and that they will keep taking to the streets.
Thank you, Sergio, for that report. Around 100 people have joined the protests in Martinique. Demonstrators blocked the access to a shopping center and protested in highways. They say they are rejecting the expensive living conditions in the country and the political elites. And Yellow Vest protests have also turned violent outside France. In Belgium, riot police have used water cannon trucks against hundreds of demonstrators in capital Brussels. More than 100 people were arrested after protesters tried to overturn police barricades blocking access to the European Union headquarters. Support protests were also reported in Amsterdam. Moving on, Chilean President Sebastián Piñera has announced the Jungle Command will stop its operations in the southern region of Araucanía. The president announced a new plan for the Mapuche region as he has promised more dialogue and the recognition of the indigenous community. This announcement comes a month after the murder of a young Mapuche at the hands of the Jungle Command that sparked outrage and protest. Our correspondent in Chile, Tiare Valenzuela, brings us more details.
An announcement has shaken Chile as the controversy for Camilo Catrillanca's murder continues.
President Sebastián Piñera has decided to remove the Jungle Command from Gualmapo, a Mapuche territory. Let's recall that Camilo Catrillanca was shot dead on November 14th during an operation made by this command in the territory of Temucucuy. But police officers were accused of destroying evidence regarding the murder as Mapuche people urged authorities to remove the Jungle Command from their territories. Piñera has also announced he will reinforce the area with special forces to be sent to the Mapuche territory. Catrillanca is the 16th Mapuche killed since the return to democracy.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Another social leader has been killed in Colombia in the department of Cauca. Edwin Dawa was the governor of the indigenous territory of Huellas and received several threats prior to his murder. Indigenous Senator Feliciano Valencia condemned the murder and said that 36 indigenous leaders have been killed under the government of President Iván Duque so far. Former Colombian President Belisario Betancourt has died at the age of 95 after being hospitalized for a kidney condition. Betancourt ruled Colombia in the mid-80s when the armed conflict was at its peak in the country. In 1985, his efforts to end the guerrilla war was undermined after an attack on the Palace of Justice in Bogota that left more than 100 people dead. During his presidency, he introduced reforms that provided low-cost housing and education. Opposition members clashed with the police in Bolivia during a protest against the nomination of President Evo Morales for a fourth term in office. Demonstrators took to the streets and called for a general strike in protest of Morales' bid. They blocked streets in capital La Paz and other main cities around the country. Protesters chanted "Bolivia say no" in reference to the 2016 referendum in which 51% of voters rejected the president's proposal to end with term limits. Meanwhile, President Evo Morales has rejected the violent protests and said they were aimed at disturbing the country. He added that despite the clashes, the democratic awareness of the people will maintain the country in peace. 12 people have been killed in Brazil during simultaneous assaults on two banks. 5 victims were members of the same family, including 2 children. The deaths occurred as police foiled the gang of armed robbers. Authorities have yet to clarify whose bullets killed the victims. A new ruling has set back U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration policies once again, this time regarding asylum applications. Our correspondent at the U.S.-Mexican border, Pablo Perez, reports.
There was a new setback for Donald J. Trump's administration and his attempts of limiting the opportunities for migrants to apply for refugee or asylum in the territory of the United States of North America. Earlier last month, the president issued an order to stop the ability of applying for refuge once they are on North American soil and detained by a border patrol agent, which is one of the legal ways of applying for refugee. And he intended that only the people crossing through border points and entry points could apply for refugee, and there is just a limited amount of applications every day, which has set back a lag of over 2 or even in some cases 3 months for those that are just arrived to this border between Mexico and the United States. Well, yesterday a judge in an appellation court in California for the second time pronounced that that measure is not legal. So the migrants, the ones that enter through the desert or jumping through the fences and have put foot on American soil, can ask for refugee status and to the border patrol agent that is detaining them. Nonetheless, it's a very complicated process, and it's calculated that only 25 to 30% of those applicants actually get a refugee status. But the truth that is happening right now is that the courts, the judges of the United States of America, particularly the state of California, are denying Trump an ability to choose who can and who cannot apply for refugee status.
Thank you, Pablo, for that report. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has proclaimed December 8 the Day of Loyalty to late President Hugo Chavez to honor his legacy. 6 years ago on this day, Chavez gave his last speech from the government palace before leaving to Cuba to receive medical treatment. This was a historic day as he asked the people to choose Maduro as president in case something happened to him. On tweet, Maduro said he will continue to lead the Bolivarian revolution and consolidate the project of Comandante Chavez. Bolivian President Evo Morales paid tribute to Comandante Chavez on Twitter. Morales remembered Chavez's call for unity and for his people to defend the country's sovereignty before passing away. Relatives of the victims of a Mozote massacre in El Salvador have received the remains of 6 of their loved ones 37 years later. Their remains were exhumed in 2015 after the Inter-American Court of Human Rights held the state responsible in 2012 and will now be buried in El Mozote. This was the worst massacre committed by the military during the country's civil war. Around 988 people were murdered, more than half were minors.
Justice should be made. Relatives, by receiving the remains of their loved ones, can close the mourning they experienced for 37 years. Today, they will have a chance to bury them according to their beliefs.
Nicaraguans are celebrating the religious festivity known as La Gritería in honor to the Virgin Mary. People gather in the cathedral located in capital Managua to honor the Virgin and also build traditional altars in the streets of the city. This religious tradition has taken part of the country's history for more than 400 years. Guatemalans have celebrated the centuries-old tradition of the burning of the devil. People across the country celebrated on the night of December 7th by burning dummies of the devil, along with household junk. This is a symbol of purification before the Catholic festival of the Immaculate Conception takes place. This act marks the start of the Christmas festivities. Cuba's capital of Havana is enjoying its annual film festival celebrating new Latin American movies. It is now the 40th edition, and Cuba has nominated 13 films. Telesur spoke with some of the participants, hoping to win a choral prize.
These are scenes from Insumisa, the most recent feature film from Cuban director Fernando Perez and Swiss producer Laura Cazador. Insumisa tells the story of a Swiss woman who arrives in the Cuban city of Baracoa in the 19th century dressed as a man and bearing the name Enrique Faber. She practices medicine and marries a local young woman. It's a dramatic tale based on real events.
It's a film that doesn't want just to dwell on themes of gender, but rather wants to portray a much more modern image. A woman who faced a closed-off existence and broke through all the barriers in front of her.
Director Alejandro Gil makes his appearance in this edition of the festival with a historic drama. His proposal is Innocence, the story of the most moving event in 19th century Havana, the execution by firing squad of 8 medical students.
It's a film based on real facts, a film that is telling a real story. So it doesn't matter what you know about history or things that can manipulate you politically to ensure that you don't look any deeper.
Mantis Nest is another Cuban feature film hoping to win a Coral. The film, directed by Arturo Soto, tells the story of a love triangle between 2 men and a woman lasting for more than 40 years. One morning in 1994, all 3 were found dead.
It may look like a thriller and have the structure of a thriller, but at the end it's a story about strong patience. It's getting more difficult to be included in this festival because they are getting more selective every time. To just participate is an honor.
2 animated films are competing in the festival. One of them is A Very Close Encounter by Paul Chaviano, a film which tells fabulous stories from the Cuban countryside with fantastical characters.
It's a stop-motion film in which figures are really moved frame by frame and based on a story paying tribute to the work of Samuel Feijó. It tells the tale of a campesino who doesn't believe anything happening around him, who has close encounters with these deities.
The International Festival of New Latin American Film will end on its 40th edition with some of the best cinema from the region. 20 feature films, 22 shorts and medium-length productions, and a whole lot more that can be enjoyed by cinema lovers.
Archaeologists in Peru have discovered more than 30 ritual tombs that could date back over 1,000 years. The tombs were found at El Chorro archaeological site in the northwest of the country, where these excavations started 2 months ago. Some bodies in the tombs were found without their feet, indicating that rituals were performed on their bodies. Most of them are believed to belong to the Mochica culture. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Thousands of secondary school teachers have taken to the streets of Tunisia against the government's refusal to address their salary demands. The teachers have boycotted the first semester exams to pressure the government to increase their wages. The National Union of Secondary School Teachers also accused the country's education minister of illegally deducting the days of boycotting from teachers' salaries. 19 slain clerics have been beatified by the Catholic Church in Algeria. This is the first ceremony of its kind in a Muslim nation. Around 1,200 people attended the ceremony, where a papal envoy beatified 7 French monks and 12 other clergymen killed in the civil war. The service was held in the city of Oran under tight security. The Great March of Return protests have resumed in the Gaza Strip. Earlier we spoke with the co-founder of the Association of Progressive Palestinian Canadians, Haman Farah, about the continuing violence and how the illegal blockade has affected communities.
You know, the lack of goods, the lack of medical aid, the restrictions on import-export, the closure of borders, the control of the airspace, the seas, fishermen who, you know, Gaza has had a thriving fishing industry, and fishermen are routinely shot at and killed trying to fish in the Mediterranean. And so Gaza's economy has been completely obliterated by the blockade, and the poverty levels and the unemployment. It's just it's a dire situation where the people have been ghettoized and have been suffering under this illegal blockade. So these marches of return that happen every week, this is the people of Gaza saying, we're taking matters into our own hands because the international community has failed to pressure Israel to end its illegal activity.
He also spoke about the Canadian government's reaction to the continued cellular violence.
Absolutely horrendously. The Canadian government, which proclaims to be pro-human rights and pro-racial justice, is doing the exact opposite when it comes to the question of Palestine. You know, the Trudeau government has voted in favor of Israel, overwhelmingly in favor of Israel at the UN. It has recently upgraded its free trade agreement with Israel, and it doesn't, you know, listen to the Palestinian Canadian community.
Now let's take a look at some other stories making headlines from around the world.
6 people died in an stampede at a nightclub in central Italy. Over 1,000 people were attending a rap concert when a stinging substance forced the crowd to rush towards the emergency exits. 5 of the victims were between 14 and 16. The 6th was a 39-year-old woman who attended the concert with her daughter. Authorities said dozens were also injured.
From the first elements of the investigation, it seems that about 1,400 tickets were sold, and it seems that only one of the nightclub's 3 halls had been open at the time, a hall with a maximum capacity of 469 people. The numbers are all wrong. I repeat, these are elements that the investigators must review, but from today, this sort of thing should not happen again. We have to prevent them from happening.
The migrant rescue ship Aquarius will end its operations after rescuing thousands of people stranded in the Mediterranean Sea. Humanitarian groups in charge of the ship said this is due to a smear campaign by European governments. The Aquarius was blocked at the French port of Marseille, and Italy accused its crew of illegally dumping toxic waste at ports and ordered its seizure. This was the last NGO ship operating off the coast of Libya. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets of Paris to urge action against climate change. Climate demonstrators walked peacefully in a cheerful atmosphere, holding banners and playing music. The COP24, billed the most important UN environmental conference since the Paris 2015 deal on climate change, is currently underway in Poland.
Madrid is set to host the Copa Libertadores final between Argentina's football teams River Plate and Boca Juniors. It is estimated that over 6,000 fans arrived from Buenos Aires to support their teams. The second leg of the final was moved to Madrid after several Boca Junior players were injured when rocks were thrown at their team bus on their way to River's Monumental Stadium. Spanish police is working with their Argentine counterparts to to control any known troublemaker.
For the River fans, it's hurt us a lot. We're a group of people who always go to the stadium. We're members of the club, and we're not the people that cause trouble. We go as a family, and we're really hurt that the match is not being played in our stadium. I think it's a shame that the match is being played in Spain, and that we have to travel all the way here without our friends.
The philosophy has always been to play in Argentina, and I think they could have done it, but maybe because of some money issues and other things we don't know, they decide to do it here. Some people didn't benefit, but some others did, like me for example, because it's very close to my home, so I took the chance to come and see Boca, which is a dream for me.
Meanwhile, tango fans in Madrid are preparing for the match by dancing tango, another of Argentina's passions. Dancers explain that both disciplines bring passion, technique, and control, attributes that both teams will apply in the final, to be played at the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium. China has launched a lunar expedition mission that is expected to attempt the first ever landing on the far side of the moon. The project Change 4 will drop a lander and rover on the far side of the moon that constantly faces away from Earth. If it lands successfully, it will examine the landscape, detecting its mineral composition and measure radiation. And with this, we come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find it at our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.